It comes every year on 19th July. But we don't think that this should be a ritual for all of us, because this bank nationalization is not only an occasion for the bank employees, of course. The bank employees are responsible uh, primarily to save the bank nationalization, and of course also to advance the understanding with which banks were nationalized. But it is also a matter of fact that the bank nationalization has played a pivotal role for the country's economy, for safety and security of the deposits of the crores of citizens, and of course giving opportunity to all the banking institutions also to flourish. So much depend on the success and performance of the public sector banks, and this understanding should not confine to the bank employees alone. It should go to the common public, common citizen, and we all understand that all these feelings do not come automatically. It has to be repeated time and again, because after 56 years, we're going to complete 56 years tomorrow, the 18th. We understand that all the benefits that has been achieved by this bank nationalization is being contemplated to reverse, and this contemplation has started more than 3 decades ago, since the advent of neoliberal economic policies in our country in the early part of 1990s. But obviously, it has gained momentum, and it has reached a different dimension after 2014, when the Narendra Modi-led NDA government came into power. And though we have been fighting against any move of privatization, but in the year 2021 only, a top executive like a finance minister, Union finance minister, has uttered the word of privatization of the public sector banks while presenting the budget for 2020-21. After this, as a continuity of struggle, the bank employees effectively, so far, have altered the government to go through their agenda. But also in the meantime, we have observed that IDBI Bank, one of the public sector banks, it has been listed as a private sector bank after 51% share has been acquired by Life Insurance Corporation. And as we know, Life Insurance Corporation, though it is a public sector company, but the majority share is not with the government now. So this has been a setback, of course, to the bank employees movement. But later also, we have successfully included this issue opposing the privatization of any public sector bank. Now, all of us understand that the banking sector, that is the financial sector, it is comprised of mainly banks and insurance. So far as banks are concerned, there are many more banks also. So far as banking institutions are concerned, there are private banks. Some of the private banks are also in some critical situation. We know that a big contributions in the country's 100 years of economic journey, the cooperatives and the cooperative banking sector has also played a big role. Now, this government and the previous two governments also from 2014-15, a serious effort is being taken to corporatize the cooperative sector, to centralize functioning of the cooperative sector, and through some amendments of the banking regulation also, some paradigm change has affected in the cooperative sector, and it is also the government's open motive to hand over the cooperative banking sector to the corporates. Now, there is regional rural banks. It has completed its journey for 50 years, providing low cost service to the rural people, having branches mainly in the rural areas, almost more than 90,000, 22,000 branches in RRBs. Now, the government has also declared that it want to go for initial public offerings so far as RRBs are concerned. So, some privatization effort is there for RRBs also. As a regulator of the country's economy banking system, Reserve Bank also played an important role. Now also some interventions are being made to control the affairs of the Reserve Bank of India. NABARD is also a very important DFI in our country, providing low interest rates to the needy and poor people. Now there are also some changes are taking place. So if we go by our practice, we can see that the total financial system, banking institutions are being tried to be controlled to corporatize the whole system. Now, as public sector banks is a very important pillar of these banking institutions, we understand that this threat of privatization of the public sector banks is the most important thing that is to be dealt by the bank employees movement with support of the common people, political parties, other trade unions, other progressive forces. So here, the Bank Nationalisation Day gives us an opportunity to take all these issues to the people in general, to the customers. So for that, we are observing this day. So we understand that in many of the states, in most of the states, this day will be observed befittingly. Now we are holding this webinar. Now we understand that so far we are concerned, our concern is not for opposing the privatization, because privatization is a fallout of the neoliberal economic policies. If we do not fight the neoliberal economic policy, we cannot effectively resist the privatization move, because privatization is not an issue confined to the banking industry alone. The government is hell bent to privatize the public sector enterprises of the whole country. So we have to saturate ourselves to this movement, to be a part of the broader working class movement, which we are since our inception, since our formation. But we have to get hold of this neoliberal economic policy. I won't take much of your time. We know that Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel laureate, is a very important name so far as the journey of the neoliberal policies in the world is concerned. Joseph Stiglitz started his career uh, with an understanding that presupposed conclusion that free market economy is the best in the world. Now, in his latest book, that is Road to Freedom, published last year, is telling that this understanding was totally wrong because the foundation was wrong. Now, the Joseph Stiglitz, who started his career for free market economy, now he's opposing this free market economy and neoliberal economic policies. Now, in his latest book, he has commented that there is an alternative financial system also in the world that is to be explored. And so far as alternative financial system is concerned, apart from away from the neoliberal economic policies, we know that in our country, the Left Democratic Front in Kerala is trying to pursue an alternative financial system so far as this national system is concerned. And for this alternative financial system, Dr. Thomas Isaac, the former finance minister, is one of the pioneers of promoting this alternative economic financial system. So we are happy, we are encouraged, we are very privileged to get Comrade Dr. Thomas Isaac to be in the webinar. I also welcome him on your behalf, and we are thankful that in spite of his busy schedule, he has taken some time to deal the issue, that is the present day challenges before the banking sector, that we are going to discuss in the webinar to observe the 57 Bank Nationalisation Day. And the business of this webinar will be conducted by Comrade S.S. Anil, President of our Federation. So without wasting much of time, I would request Comrade S.S. Anil to conduct the business of this webinar. Thank you, comrades.
Yes, comrades, good evening all. Thank you, Comrade Devashish. So, comrades, today we have assembled in this webinar in connection with the 57th Bank Nationalization Day, that is on 19th of July. As you all know, it was on 19th July 1969 that 14 private sector banks were nationalized. And before that, that was a mega bank nationalization. Before that, during 1955, the then Imperial Bank of India, it was nationalized, and State Bank of India, it was formed. I'm not taking much time, but I just want to point out that recently we have noticed some press reports regarding that offloading of shares of State Bank of India. Now, State Bank of India, they have decided to offload shares amounting to rupees 25,000 crores. See, now also, government share in State Bank of India is now only 56.92%. Now, if this 25,000 rupees crore they are offloading, then that percentage of government share, it may come down to less than 55%. Not only in State Bank of India, when we take private sector banks, see the bank which has an headquarters in Kerala, that is the old private sector bank which is having more than 100 years of service. That is a Catholic Syrian bank. During 2018, the first finance capital entry, that is in CSB Bank, Fairfax, a Canadian shareholding company. They acquired 51% of share for just rupees 1,200 crores. During 2018 to 2024, that is after 6 years of that acquirement, now they had decided, they had already uh, uh, sold around 9.72 percentage of that shares they have acquired, and by that sale they got 592 crores. That is 50% of the amount they have spent during 2018, acquiring 51% share. Now only 9% they have sold, and they got 50% of the amount they have already spent. Not only in state CSB Bank, then in IDBI Bank. IDBI Bank also, Emirates Group, they are trying to acquire the share of IDBI Bank. Yes Bank, recently, in Yes Bank, recently, another finance corporation, that is Sumitomo Mitsui Banking Corporation, the second largest banking company in Japan. They acquired around 20% of stake in S Bank. 13,483 crores they have spent. Yes, finance capital is actually swallowing our banking sector. On these grounds, as already mentioned by Comrade Debashish, Bank Employees Federation of India Central Committee, when its meeting was held on 25th of May at Guwahati, it was decided to observe Bank Nationalisation Day on 19th July by displaying posters, wearing badges, holding gate meetings, corner meetings, seminar, webinar, etc. And as per that decision only, in today, in this this webinar we are conducting, we are very happy that on the day, that is on the day when we had our meeting at Guwahati, at that day itself, when we contacted Dr. Thomas Isaac, he very happily uh, gave his willingness to participate in this webinar. And not only that, he's there in the webinar even before myself uh, get into this webinar. He was there in this webinar. He came here, I think he might have reached 15 minutes early. So we are all eagerly waiting for his deliberation. So I request Comrade Dr. Thomas Isaac to kindly deliver the keynote address on the subject, present day challenges before the banking sector. Thank you, Comrade. Over to Comrade Dr. Thomas Isaac. Okay, Comrade.
Thank you very much, Comrade Anil and Devashish Basu. Dear comrades and friends, the bank nationalization 57 years back remains, without doubt, the single most important economic decision taken by any government since 1947. Not even the reforms of 1991 are comparable in their consequences, political, social, and of course, economic. Who says this? It's the Reserve Bank of India. Reserve Bank of India in its official history of the bank. When it comes to bank nationalization, this is what they have said, that this is the single most important economic decision taken by any government since 1947. What makes nationalization so important and special? See, when our country gained independence, whether you like it or not, whether you are a friend or foe, we had a strategic vision about developing India, which in fact was broadly evolved by the ruling classes in the pre-independence period itself. Now, in this vision of India, the banking sector, the financial sector had a very important role to play. Basically, three roles. You know, when we started our first 5-year plan, we had to be contented with a small and modest plan. That's how the first 5-year plan was described. because there was no resources. The saving rate in the country was less than 10%, and therefore everybody realized that if we want to accelerate growth, have bigger and bolder plans, is very important to raise the saving rate. And in this connection, the role of the bank becomes very, very important, the financial sector. Second, at the time of independence, because India was the money lenders ruled the entire rural areas. The banking sector for support was totally denied to agriculture, the artisans, and so on, and it catered to only the urban centers, particularly the metropolitan capital. So it's very, very, very important to diversify the destination of the banking investment and loans. And therefore, it was thought as important to have a social control on the banks. And thirdly, our the development vision allotted a special role to the government. In fact, this was a position that accepted by the bourgeois class. The Bombay Plan itself said that the state had to mobilize resources and make investment in infrastructure and basic industries because the bourgeois class didn't have the sufficient resources in their hands. And how could government mobilize such resources? There, the financial sector was to play a very important role. It was supposed to mobilize the savings in an increasing scale and route it to the government. Now, after some time, everybody realized things were not moving in the correct direction. And in this context, that a bold decision was made in 1969 to nationalize 14 banks, and later a second phase of nationalization in 1980, where 6 other banks were nationalized. Now, the decision to nationalize the banks becomes very, very historical and important because with the nationalization, the vision of development that was outlined was realized. We were able to mobilize resources and accelerate growth. In fact, I can point out the 4 specific achievements of nationalization. One is the stability of the financial sector itself. Say between 1947 and 61, there were 681 banks. The pre-nationalization period, 68, 681 banks in India went bankrupt. It's a phenomenal number here. But after nationalization, no bank went bankrupt. Between 68 and 2008, 36 banks get into trouble, near bankruptcy, but they were absorbed by the public sector banks. It did not allow any bank to collapse. So this was a very dramatic change the nationalization brought about regarding the stability of the financial sector, a tradition which has survived even after 1991. In the 2008-9 global financial shakeup, Indian banks stood with the flying colors, came out. In fact, the finance minister Chidambaram came out saying, praising the public sector banks, though after some years he himself became a votary of denationalization. But at the same time, even the recent 2020 21, 22, 23 banking trouble in US did not trouble us. Okay, this is the strength of our public sector banks. Second, there is a phenomenal expansion of credit. Say the bank branches between 1951 and 69. The 18 years before nationalization, it doubled. Yes, it did increase. But between 69 and 87, 18 years after nationalization, the bank branches increased by 7 times. Again, 1951 to 1969, the 18 years before nationalization, the loans increased by, say, 7 times. But 18 years after nationalization, the loans increased by 17 times. So much so, the saving rate rapidly increased, and in 2004, it reached the peak of 37%, much beyond what the first 5-year plan planners had even imagined. Now, three, the diversification of the loans to the rural areas, the agriculturists, and the marginalized people substantially increased with the introduction of priority sector lending. The rural area share of the bank loans increased from 22% to 37%. Agriculture in 1951 accounted for just a mere 2.2% of the entire bank loans. By 1968, it had increased to 5.4%. And by 2014, it reached nearly 30%. The priority sector lending in 1969, and year after the nationalization, was 14.6%. It increased to 39%. And finally, the investment in government bonds. In 1970, it was a mere 1,727 crores of rupees. In 2014, it was 24.37 lakh crores of rupees. So, whatever objective the nation put for the banking sector as a part of nationalization was more than achieved. Then why does the ruling class now want to denationalize, change the policy? Primarily because the world has changed. We have now become a part of the neoliberal world order, where the finance capital rules the rules, where the free movement of capital becomes very, very important. Of course, neoliberal order means, to begin with, free trade, definitely. But it's just not free trade alone. Now, for example, Trump has become protectionist, but still he's neoliberal. Why is he neoliberal? Because he has put certain restrictions on protection, but he has no restrictions on the movement of capitals. In fact, if he ever attempts that, that will be his end. That's the power of the finance capital. So now the finance capital, they find it very important that they have access to the financial market in every country in the world. And that's why the GATT was expanded into WTO treaty, where these investment and related services, everything was brought into the trade agreement. So there was pressure from the metropolitan centers for India to privatize, open up the banking sector, financial sector. In fact, it was the insurance sector that US even threatened with Super 301, the early 1990s. In fact, it was a big scandal, it was a big protest all over. So there was a tremendous pressure from World Bank, multilateral agencies, and from the world financial capital. So the government vision of development, strategy of development has also changed. In fact, and therefore there was a need to realign the policies in the banking sector. And Narasimham was the hatchet man. There is a small report of his, and you read it, you'll be amazed how this learned man decides, puts forward the argument for privatization and banking reforms. He just says Indian banks are not profitable enough. How does he do that? He takes the gross capital, the profits of the banking sector, divides it by the total assets, and says it is less than 1%, very low. Profitability is the measuring yard for efficiency. And therefore, he concludes that Indian banking sector is inefficient and therefore it has to be made more efficient, for which purpose competition has to be brought in. How do you make the banks competitive, banking sector competitive? You allow private sector players to come in, and then you will have to make the public sector banks competitive. So then it goes into a program how to make it more profitable and competitive. It means reducing the expenditure through cutting the expenditure in many ways, cutting the branches, reducing the workforce. Two, it has to increase the revenue. That means liberalization of interest rate and so on, removing or curtailing the private sector lending and so on. So a whole host of reforms flowed. Surprisingly, the man did not even look or examine what is the purpose of nationalization, what is the purpose, the social objective that the nation uh, put on the banking sector. Banking sector was not viewed as a sector to generate profit for government. It is viewed as a sector which will raise the saving rate in the country, ensure that a part of the savings do go to support agriculture and the small scale sector, and this money be channelized to the government. So, which was the objective of nationalization. But the man never look at it. He takes a different yardstick and says this, it is not profitable, and therefore to make it profitable, certain reforms to have to become. So there is some committee reforms. Now, what follows? Narasimhan comes to make banking sector profitable. But then what followed was something terribly opposite, you see. Banking sector surplus began to decline, and the 2010s it the loss began to mount and mount. So you have a set of reforms to make the banks more profitable, and you finally end up with the banking sector uh, uh, continuously making serious loss. Why? How? How did this happen? The permissive atmosphere that came about with the reforms, all cautions were thrown to the air, and the banking, whatever finance that was available, was cornered by the cronies and the corporates in a manner unprecedented. India was getting into an infrastructure investment program. We had specialized financial institutions for long-term infrastructure lending. They were all scuttled, and therefore the task of financing infrastructure came to the banks. Banks, mobilize resources through deposits. They're saving current deposits or fixed deposits, but even a fixed deposit will be of too few years at the most. But infrastructure lending would mean tying up this short-term money, relatively short-term money, for a long period. There's a terrible mismatch between the time mismatch between the deposits and the loans. And when this big infrastructure enterprise begins to falter, and because many of these big infrastructure investment corporates, etc., were looking towards to not to loot uh, rather than make use of money for real investment. The best case would be Vijay Mallya or Nirav Modi. They were just with a conscious, deliberate attempt to loot the public money. See, that was the environment and atmosphere that was created after the reforms. You have a situation where NPA began to mount, and the NPA by 17-18 reached 14.6% of the outstanding loans. This is a level which Basel Treaty or any Basel Treaty, no sane person can accept having NPA of 14.6. And it has to be brought down. And how was it achieved? By writing off. Between 2014, when Modi came to power, and now, total of 16.5 lakh crores have been written off. Now, writing off means bad debt provisioning has to be taken place, has made, which means erosion of capital, and therefore the banks, now the surplus um, all went to the same bad debt provisioning, and then you had the government to shell out. In fact, the government gave something like 3.69 lakh crores rupees on the budget to support the banks because some corporates have taken away the money. They now say that the money would be recovered, etc., from the corporates. The writing off doesn't mean that it is written off really, it's only a technical thing, etc. But now you find after this many years, the recovery is as low as 14%. So it's a huge write-off of common man's money. Deposits taken from the household sector in India to the corporate looters. And you have a situation that the banks are all in big trouble. And because the banks are in trouble, government cannot continue to finance them. And therefore, this was made as a reason for the importance of privatization. They have created a situation in the banking sector, which is their own making. Now they want to use it as a reason for privatization efforts. But surprisingly, after COVID, things turned around. I think, I must admit, the government almost burned the finger. It will be economic collapse here if you have a banking sector crisis of a scale which say in the West, and therefore some sense of prudency came, and you have little more due diligence in looking at the loans and so on, and because of the write-off for over a decade, you have a turnaround, and by post-COVID period, the banks began to be more profitable. In 2023-24, the total banking profits was 1.41 lakh crores as against 1.05 lakh crores in the previous year. Now, this is very important to understand how this turnaround came. What are the factors responsible? Of course, the credit expanded and so on, business turnover increased, etc. The bad debts were written off, removed from the accounts. Those are the. But the most important factor is the interest, increase in the non-interest income. The non-interest income, fees, commissions, trading income, and service income. In 2018-19, it's 22%. In 2024-25, is 28 to 30%. Now we are normally in the banks. Banks earn their money by interest on the loan scheme. Now we have a situation that increasing a share of non-interest income in the revenues of the bank. In the private banks, it is even worse. It is 35%, 35 to 40% of the banking income comes from non-interest sources. Now, how does it? What are these non-banking in sources of income? One, bank assurance, minimum balance penalty, all sorts of processing fees. One, the public sector banks now tie up with private insurances to sell their services and make money. Two, they have various other services made, including NBFCs, tie up with them, earning a share of the profits they make. So, this non-interest income, it is important to focus on this important issue. I will come to this later. When we think about how to meet the challenges of the present banking sector, it is important to think about this component of the income of the banks. Second, there is a squeeze on the expenditure, which affects the bank workers and so on. This change towards increasing reliance on non-interest income reflects a neoliberal shift, Indian banking favoring urban high-margin services over rural low-income borrowers. That's what it implies. Now, surprisingly, we find with the increase in the profits, one would have thought the pressures for privatization would come down, because in the earlier phase, privatization was being pushed, the banks are so bad, making so much loss of their own making. But now banks are making profits. Therefore, the rulers think it is profitable to sell the bank. Now, what's all happening? One, 5 state-run banks: UCO Bank, Central Bank of India, Indian Overseas Bank, Bank of Maharashtra, Punjab, and Sindh Bank. Their sales of the shares are on the card, and their government shareholding is likely to decline below 75%. So stake sales in 5 state-run banks announced in January 2025. So that's all. People keep on asking, why do you want to do this? Your banks are giving 1.45 lakh crores of rupees as profit to the exchequer. So why do you want to sell at the face value? I mean, okay, market face value, just even below that, the shares. So there is no answer to it. In fact, this is the biggest argument against disinvestment that is taking place in the parliament and so on. Secondly, as Anil mentioned, there is IDBI bank privatization progress going on. Target date is October 2025, by which IDBI would once again be denationalized. Okay, so they get over from the private sector that way, but now once again it is going to be denationalized by October. Government and Life Insurance Corporation of India divesting a combined share of 61% stake in IDBI Bank, with Center holding 30.48% and Lacy holding 30.24%. Next, privatization of Central Bank of India and Indian Overseas Bank. There was a whole All India strike on protesting against that. They have been forced to put it on hold, but not publicly reject the proposal. Next, there have been proposals for further banking reforms in July 2025. Raising foreign direct investment FDI in cap in state-owned banks to 26% and private banks to 74%. Allowing large and non-banking financial companies, NBFCs, to convert into banks. I think that is going to be the most favorite route of entry of private banks. And the government of India is also promoting wholly owned subsidiaries of the foreign banks. Big danger, as Anil said, is with respect to State Bank of India. Already shares are only with the government of India 56.9%. 11% is held by foreigners, 24% by financial institutions, and 2.3% by corporates. Since there are severe restrictions on corporates taking hold of the shares, they're holding through financial institutions and so on. So anyway, important thing is State Bank of India is on the brink. One big push, government will become a minority shareholder. So only 8% remains to be pushed over into the private sector. And Government of India has come out with, the bank has come out with a qualified institutional placement of 25,000 crores, which, as Anil said, if it goes through, government can lose the majority share of in the bank. Similar is the situation with Bank of Baroda, 64%, Punjab National Bank, already 77%, and so on. So this is happening on one side. Other side, NBFCs are making steady inroads in the banking market. Same. Already 61% of the gold loan is by NBFCs. The bond loans of NBFCs in 2013 was 8.6 of the GDP. Now it is already 12% in 2020. Now share of the scheduled banks in the period declined by 60% to 51%. Now I come to the final part of my presentation. All this underlines the need for eternal vigilance and united action. It has been very frustrating, not only for the Indian ruling classes, but international financial oligarchy, that they have not been able to open up Indian financial sector, whether it be insurance or it be banking sector or capital account convertibility. by and large, the resistance is not mass of people all over rallying to protect them, prevent it, but very effective intervention by united, by the workers, employees, have been able to stall this. In fact, the frustrations are shown in many, many ways. So much so, in 2024 budget, they stopped saying, "Oh, we are going to privatize." You see, Union budget of 24 did not include significant announcement on banking privatization, instead focusing on fiscal consolidation and social spending. Now, government avoided pre-announcing divestment plans to maximize value as stated by Finance Secretary TV Somanathan. Now, I don't know if it is a pause or a way of saving the face. The failure to push the agenda on the measured timetable of this, I think, is forcing them to take a pause. And it is in this context. They're not giving up. They can't. There are pressures not from India, but also from international financial sector. One knows what Trump is going to demand here. He is now looking only at the restrictions on trade, whatever little things that remains. But if 30 years back they could threaten us with Super 301, there is nothing to prevent Trump by picking it up, a financial sector, for his bargaining. Therefore, it is very important in the present juncture to rally not just the bank employees, but every section of the population that is being affected or will be affected by bank privatization. Let me make one simple say information. There are 9 million SHGs, self-help groups, with 100 million members, which means 14 SHGs per village in India, and 1 in 8 women in India are its members. In the households are members. This is a huge number. Now, why do I say this? Of the total lending of 4 lakh crores to SHGs, already 1.34 lakh crores are by NBFCs. Where do the NBFCs mobilize resources to lend to the SHGs or the microfinance institutions? They cannot take deposits. They take the resources from the banking sector. You see. Now, Government of India has ordained that the priority sector lending to SHGs can be through NBFCs. Suppose a bank lends to an NBFC or lending to SHG, that will be considered bank's priority sector lending. So increasingly, the SHG sector is getting controlled by this microfinance institution. What's the problem with that? The problem is that the average rate of interest comes to something like 15 to 20%. It's utterly ruinous rate of interest here. Just imagine, for consumption purposes, microfinance is essentially for consumption mostly, having to pay 20% of interest. What micro enterprise can ever produce a rate of return which would permit the entrepreneur, the small scale petty entrepreneur, to pay 20% interest to a microfinance institution. Suppose the direct lending from the bank, even without subvention, it will be, say, 7 to 9% or 8 to 10%. Instead of that, each of these cities are shelling out 15 to 20% rate of interest. Now the Kerala is the only state in India where Kudumbashree, we insist we take loan bank linkage with the public sector banks or with the cooperatives. We refuse. In fact, the government of India was telling now the Kudumbashree neighborhood network, you set up a financial institution, take bank money and relent. I said, no. We have insisted our neighborhood groups would be directly linked to the public sector banks or the cooperative banks. Now, this is a large number of people, you see. I don't want to say to start a kind of, but I think a industry strike. Just refuse to pay the 20%. The fair rate, 10%, that's the slogan. And this is a slogan which can mobilize the entire SHGs in India. You had a situation in Andhra where so many people committed suicide that to bring a law to restrict the rates in the streets. So I think this is a very, very important issue on which large number of people can be mobilized. Why? Question is, why do the public sector banks have to go through the NBFCs? It's funny to read the literature. They say NBFCs are special skills of attaching to, they bear the risk which saves the bank. Silly. See, the repayment rate of, say, Kudumbashree is 99%. What risk is the NBFC taking by lending to a Kudumbashree group or any other such a group? The peer group pressure compels every person to repay. It's only the kind of Malayas and Nirav Modis have no sense of respect, self-respect, deliberately try to loot, cheat. But the poor have a sense of respect. They always think, what do my neighbor think about me if I don't repay? So I'm telling you now, we need allies in the struggle. I say here is one sector which is being fleeced because of these new policies of government of India, which is promoting NBFCs and getting them linked to banks. I think here there is an opportunity to intervene and mobilize. Second, now the banks, the same procedure is even for agriculture. See, the agriculture loans from the public sector banks are routed to again NBFCs because they say they have more skills in dealing uh, with the peasants and farmers. But just compare this SBI with 22,200 branches, 46 crore customers, 2.5 lakh employees, and 42 lakh crores of assets. This is our SBI. He is having a tie-up with Adani Capital to lend to farmers. Yeah. What is Adani Capital? 63 branches in 6 states. 760 employees, 28,000 customers, 1,300 crores of assets. Why in the hell should the State Bank of India require this funny fellow? See, this obviously Adani Capital is trying to piggy ride State Bank of India. Perhaps at future some date, when State Bank become state, even thinking of taking over, getting experience in dealing with, learning the ropes with the State Bank. Now, what is the implication for the farmer? Adani has agribusiness. Adani has say, warehouses. So now you have a situation. Adani supplies the agricultural inputs along with the money taken by SBI and buys back the agriculture products. The public sector money is used to completely deny the freedom for the farmer. Something like what the merchant money lenders did in the pre-independence period. You see. You have now a new green revolution coming up. India government of India wants to push up the productivity. Unlike the Green Revolution 1, where the state was the extension agency. Now in the Green Revolution 2, state is not going to play that role. That role is going to be played by the agribusiness. They prescribe the inputs, they provide the finance, they buy back the output of the crop, they process it and sell it. That's the model. The farmers are under up in arms. The whole big historical banks in the farmer struggle was also against us. Here is a way of linking up the bank struggle with the struggle of the peasants, you see. Similarly, priority sector lending and so on. So these provide an opportunity for a kind of alliance, broad alliance of bank employees and other working sections of the people who are very badly affected already by the reforms and would definitely be cornered if the strategy of privatization comes through. I think, yes. So I will stop with this. So I think the 57th anniversary of bank nationalization is indeed an event for celebration, not because of historical significance of bank nationalism, because we are also celebrating the fact we have not allowed the ruling classes to privatize our banks. And it is an opportunity, it is an occasion, look into the possibilities of aligning with our broader masses of people also. I hope comrades will look in these directions. I thank you. I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to addressing you. Thank you very much.
Okay, comrade Thomas Isaac. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. In Kerala, we used to say that comrades like Comrade Thomas Isaac, they are part and parcel of Bank Employees Federation of India. See, with that freedom,
Yes,
may I ask you one thing?
I know.
Yeah. Two questions is there in the chat box. Can you please, can you see that, or can I have to read it out so that can you answer that also? Only two questions are there.
Okay, what are they?
One is, can we say that banking reforms as a part of neoliberal policies is failed, as US and capitalist countries are bailing out their major banks using their revenue income? That is one question. And the second one is, can capitalism be reformed as they argue to prevent or mitigate economic crisis?
First
Comrade,
one,
can you?
um, banking reforms are definitely a part of neoliberal agenda. Now, US capital, has it failed? And US capital in as US and capitalist countries are bailing out their major banks. Okay, whenever there is a crisis, they would say regulation is very important. When somebody like Trump comes, he doesn't want to regulate. He wants to deregulate. You see, they forget what happened in the past. But that's part of the neoliberal agenda to give maximum freedom to uh, the capital. And how is the bailing out done? Is the money of the people, you see. So the corporate capital, finance capital doesn't lose anything. The bailout money, they're insured by the state. Therefore, uh, in fact, for the banking sector capitalists, the financial capital, I think it is a win-win situation here. They don't lose. They don't lose. What is the second question? Can capitalism be reformed, as they argue, to prevent, mitigate economic crisis? Well, that's what they said when the Soviet Union went down. To the greatest surprise, in 2008, the crisis came back with such vengeance. Everybody has a cast, and everybody went back to Marx to understand how this was happening, you see. So, capitalism cannot be reformed to remove the crisis. In fact, look at what is happening. See, the kind of crisis that is taking place in the capitalist world cannot be met by reforming the capitalism. We have a situation now, the advantages of science and technological revolution, the productivity is rising so much, now AI and so on. Now, this allows enough production to meet everybody's needs. But what is happening? There is kind of polarization of the rich and poor, so that benefits entirely accrue to a small section. So much so everybody is afraid what is going to happen. You see. Well, the productivity AI increases. I think we should be happy. Everybody is wondering about unemployment. Why should there be unemployment? Now AI productivity increases manyfold and therefore reduce the working days from 5 days to 3 days. Everybody could continue to be employed. But capitalism cannot be reformed to think in this manner here. That's why the system will have to go. The system will have to go because it is resulting in unacceptable levels of inequality. Secondly, it is creating unsustainable, say, contradiction with the nature. And on both these counts, capitalism cannot be reformed. Capitalism has to be overthrown. So, Anil, thank you very much. I began my economic classes about 40 years back as the most frequent teacher of Biffy, because Biffy has one important characteristic of many sections in the workers and employees. Biffy has played always much paid much attention to studies and ideological work. I think that is one of the strengths of PIFI. So I'm also very happy I had a role to play a long time back when initially PIFI was set up. Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay, comrade. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, comrades, so we have heard the words of Comrade Thomas Isaac. So I want to say we have to strengthen our movement to protect the banking sector, to protect the financial sector. Not only that, to protect the country, we have to strengthen our movement. So on 19, that is the 57th day anniversary of bank nationalization, several programs Bank Employees Federation of India has called. So it is to be implemented in the right spirit in all our states, in all the districts, wherever possible, as many as programs we have to conduct. Officially, I request Comrade Hari Rao, Secretary of Bank Employees Federation of India, to propose vote of thanks. Comrade Hari Rao.
Dear comrades, as per the decision of our Central Committee held in Guwahati, this webinar has been conducted today. It was conducted very befittingly. We are very much inspired by the speech of Dr. Professor Thomas Isaac, who has given a very beautiful speech, taking us before our freedom and after the freedom also. The bank sector, what it has come through and what is the achievement our Indian economy has made after nationalization. We have to take into consideration that this government, which is the present minority BJP government, which is ruling our country, it has opposed in the previous form of Johnson, it has opposed the nationalization in 1969 in the parliament by none other than Atal Bihari Vajpayee and also Balraj Mathok, who is the founder of Johnson. They have opposed this nationalization. So we cannot expect more from them that they are for privatization of this banking sector. We have to oppose them. This BJP government, which is tried for 400 seats and boasted that they will be winning 400 seats, but they have come down and they have become a minority status. So it is not only our duty to save the public sector bank, to save the public sector entities, and to save the economy, but also to defeat this government, not only in parliament, but also in all the states, because they are trying to manipulate the entire election system also, what we are seeing in Bihar. So we have to, our duty is not only to save the public sector bank, but also to save this country from this fascist rule. I thank our General Secretary for giving his introductory speech of the current situation of the banking sector. And I thank Comrade S. Anil, the President of our union, who has started the meeting right exactly by 7:30. And he managed the time management and also was explained in detail how the foreign companies are taking over the private banks and also the public sector banks, how they are controlling the private sector banks to foreign entities. And I thank on behalf of Bank Employees Federation of India and also on my personal behalf, Professor Dr. Thomas Isaac, former Finance Minister of Kerala, who is a renowned economist of this country, who has given a broad picture how this country has developed because of the nationalization of this public sector banks, and has also appreciated BFI that it has taken all the steps to not only in saving the public sector banks, but also in ideological way also how BFI is functioning in the past many years, and is close association with BFI. And also thank all the comrades who have participated in this meeting. In spite of it is a working day, they have participated in more number, around 350 comrades have participated in this webinar. And I thank all comrades on my personal behalf and also on behalf of Bank Employees Federation of India. And I request all our comrades to celebrate the 57th nationalization day after tomorrow, befittingly, because we have to celebrate it, because as detailed by Professor Thomas Isaac, our bank sector has endured all the financial meltdowns throughout the world, but our banking sector stood against all those things and stood firm in this country. So with this, I thank all comrades, and I request all the comrades and our BFI leadership and BFI comrades in all states, all bank-wise units to celebrate this Bank Nationalisation Day befittingly. And I thank one and all for giving me the opportunity to pray a vote of thanks. Thank you, comrades.
Okay, comrade, thank you. So, comrades, once again, on behalf of Bank Employees Federation of India, we are expressing our sincere thanks and gratitude to Comrade Thomas